Good evening, everyone. Late Night Mega here, and tonight we're playing Jeskai Soulfire Grandmaster deck. Now, this deck started as me wanting to use Ojutai's command in Modern. This is a card I've been wanting to use in Modern for quite a while, and I tried brewing at least a half dozen lists with this thing in various color combinations. I had Esper, I've had Jeskai, and if you're using Ojutai's command, you really want to make sure that you can use that first ability, returning a creature with 2 mana or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. You want to make sure you can get some use out of that effect. Now, you don't need to completely stuff like 12 creatures that cost 2 mana in order to get use out of it. Just a few of them will be enough to get the job done. But, I would brew with this, and I would end up at a point where I've got so much in the deck, and I have no idea how to trim it down. And so what I ended up doing for this deck here is I took a template, kind of a spell slinger type of template, you could say, from my Cruel Ultimatum deck. And so you'll notice a lot of similarities between the Cruel Ultimatum list and this list. For instance, we've got 29 instants and sorceries, which we can use because we also have the Augur of Bolas that we're running again. And same thing with the Cruel Ultimatum deck. We ran 2 Augurs and 29 instants and sorceries. So there's that. We have, since we're running the Augurs, we're going to run a couple big payoff spells. We've got Secure the Waste, since we're not in Grixis colors. We have Secure the Waste and Sphinx's Revelation as our big payoff spells. We have a bunch of 1-mana cards, Serum Visions, Lightning Bolt, Path to Exile. We've got 11 1-mana spells. The Cruel Ultimatum list had 10 1-mana spells, so we're about in the same area. 2 Izzet Charms, 4 Remands, just to help us get... Remands will help us get through our deck, find what we need to find faster. 1 of Electrolyze, and 3 Cryptic Commands, and this build also has 3 Lightning Helix for additional burn and removal. And then I've got 2 Soulfire Grandmasters here. This is one of the other main cards of the deck. And so what Soulfire does is it gives all our instants and sorceries lifelink. So Lightning Bolt basically turns into Lightning Helix, and Lightning Helix, well, just gains a 6 life now instead of 3. It's a bit silly. But another thing I wanted to focus on with this deck is Soulfire's second ability. You can spend 4 mana, and the next time you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it goes back into your hand instead of the graveyard as it resolves. Now that last part, as it resolves, is kind of key, because if the spell doesn't resolve for whatever reason, the target becomes illegal, or it gets countered, it does not return to your hand, and you essentially spent 4 mana for nothing. But with this deck, once you get 5 mana, you can start buying back Lightning Bolts, which have lifelink. You can start buying back Path to Exiles. You get to 6 mana, you can start buying back Lightning Helix and Remand. And you get up to 7 mana, you can do Electrolyze. 8 mana, you can start buying back Cryptic Commands and Ojutai's commands, and it just gets really silly from there. We also have a 1 of Elspeth. Elspeth, just a great way to close out games in Modern, from my experience. A lot of decks just cannot handle a resolved Elspeth. It just gets out of control, takes over the board. And so that's very nice. And we also have 2 Snapcasters. So we have 6 creatures here that can be brought back with Ojutai's command. And yeah, so that's essentially the deck. We have 24 lands, again, kind of based on the Cruel Ultimatum list. I'm not running any man lands in this, because with all these cheap instants and sorceries, I do want to have the ability of all my lands coming in untapped. So I've got 5 fetches with this one, 4 Flooded Strand, 1 Polluted Delta, 5 shock lands, 5 basics, the 3-1-1 split. Again, much like much like Cruel Ultimatum. One big difference though is I am running a one of Reflecting Pool, and this is it kind of acts like a tricolor check land. You know, it'll make 1 mana of any color that you could already produce. It comes into play untapped 100% of the time, barring weird situations like Thalia or something. But comes in untapped, and it just provides, you know, any color that you need for your deck. It's not too hard to assemble all 3 of the colors, so running this as a one of, it's pretty good. I've been pretty satisfied with it. And we've got a couple Sulfur Falls here. The sideboard, you know, I mentioned that this Trinket Mage package is going to come back again, and it's here. So we've got the Trinket Mage, 2 Engineered Explosives, 1 Pithing Needle, 1 Relic of Progenitus. And so that's kind of our Trinket Mage package. This is also where we've got the Mass Removal with Engineered Explosives. We also have one-ofs of Anger of the Gods and Supreme Verdict. I kind of went with a split here because I do really enjoy the Anger of the Gods. I love the exiling effect. It is relevant against a lot of different decks. And another thing I wanted to do was have the ability to have Anger of the Gods and Soulfire Grandmaster out, because it would give our Anger of the Gods lifelink. And yes, I have done this before. You do end up losing your own Soulfire Grandmaster, but when you're gaining like 18 life off of it, it's really amusing. I enjoy it anyways. And then we have our standard Blessed Alliance for our sacrifice effect, more life gain, Dispels to help us win counter wars, a Keranos because I do like having a Keranos in the board to bring in. There's just some decks that it's really good against, decks that just cannot handle a resolved Keranos. And Keranos and Elspeth make quite a nice combination. You know, this was both of those, Keranos and Elspeth, almost became both in the main deck. Again, I was just kind of running out of room in the main deck with this, as I've kind of mentioned from the previous times I tried brewing with this. Speaking of which, there's a ton of other 2-mana cards, or 2-mana creatures, that could very easily fit this theme. Young Pyromancer, probably the biggest one. Young Pyromancer was cards like 61 and 62 that I ended up cutting from the main deck, but those could go in here if you would like somewhere. I just really like the ability to dig a few cards deep to find an instant or sorcery that we need. So that's why I gave Augur of Bolas the nod there. But feel free to play around, feel free to experiment. Wall of Omens is another nice card to have with Ojutai's command. And, oh, back to the sideboard. So yeah, Keranos would have been card number 63 in the main deck. Because I do want to try a Keranos Elspeth both in the main deck sort of control deck. I think that would be those two combined make very interesting set of finishers. But that's not quite where this deck is. And we have our Crumble to Dust for Tron, of course. So, decks that this is good against, mainly any sort of creature-based decks, because you have a lot of things that hit creatures with Lightning Bolts, Lightning Helix, Paths, Izzet Charms, Electrolyze, all that sort of stuff. Ojutai's commands can only counter creature spells. That's another big strike against the command. If it could counter any sort of spell, that would just be off the wall amazing. And also, another matchup that this deck really likes is sort of like a burn or a red aggro or goblins matchup, because you have so much stuff that gains you life. You've got the Soulfires that have lifelink themselves and give your Lightning Bolts lifelink. You've got Lightning Helix. Izzet Charm can also deal 2 damage, so that would get lifelink as well. And you've got main deck Ojutai's command and Sphinx's Revelation. So yeah, a lot of things that regain you life in this deck. And in the sideboard, you have even more life gain with the Blessed Alliance. So yeah, any sort of creature-based decks is what you want to be running into. Decks that you're not going to like as much, more of the graveyard interaction decks. Dredge, you've got the Trinket Mage, and you've got one relic in here. On that, you're going to want a well-timed Anger of the Gods against Dredge, but those aren't quite as reliable. When you need them, and if you don't have them, you're going to end up being sad. Combo decks, again, there's not a ton of counters, and depending on which combo deck you're up against, if you're up against a creature-based combo deck like the Abzan Collected Company decks, you might be fine because you have a ton of spot removal that's still going to be live, but against something like Ad Nauseam, all this burn and paths are pretty much going to be dead. So you can struggle there. But another nice thing about playing red is that you do get the option to burn out your opponent. So that is another way of winning. And also dumping a bunch of tokens at the end of your opponent's turn is another great thing. I do think this deck should probably have a 25th land in here somewhere. Not really sure what the land would be. It could really be anything, really. But just something to make sure you get land drops. But I don't really know what to cut from this. I played this deck for a few weeks. I enjoyed it. It's a fun deck. It does what it was designed to do. And that's abuse Soulfire Grandmaster and Ojutai's command. And what I really want to be doing with Ojutai's command in Modern, though, is using it alongside Baleful Strix. However, Baleful Strix is not Modern legal, but if it was, you can rest assured I will be building an Esper deck with 3 to 4 Baleful Strix and at least 2 to 3 Ojutai's commands. I'll abuse that all day long. But that is the deck. So the next deck we're going to look at will be... Actually, it's going to be a non-blue control deck for next time. So, yeah, the second deck on this channel that will not have blue in it. So that is all for me, and this is Late Night Mega. Good night, everyone.